Different, the podcast that redefines leadership and challenges the status quo. Hosted by Daniel Dominguez, founder and CEO, Why Not Leadership. This show is your compass to becoming a better leader through the power of self-awareness. Good leaders foster teams that are engaged, empowered, and energized. Join us on this transformative journey as we equip you with the tools and insights to lead different. Get ready to challenge the ordinary and embrace self-aware leadership. This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different, because great leaders change the world.
John Mihalyo, how are you today?
Dan, it is great to see you. How are you today, sir?
I am outstanding. Welcome to the Lead Different podcast. It's been a whirlwind trying to get you scheduled. You're busy. I'm busy. It just speaks to the need that there is out there for the work that you're doing, and I'm so glad that you're busy because you're doing God's work, John.
Amen to that, and likewise to you. It's been good to get to know you over the past few months. It's crazy how things happen in this world, and we've gotten to know each other, and so I've enjoyed connecting with you and learning more about what you do and the great work you're doing. So it's great to be here with you today for sure.
It's that kind of day to day. We're going to be talking to you. We're going to be talking to some Catholic Foundation CEOs later today. We're preparing for a big event in Wisconsin in May, so that's going to be a fun work. I've got an opportunity to interview another great Catholic leader on Tuesday or Wednesday, I believe, and I'm looking forward to that. He's been blowing up on YouTube, talking about apologetics and just talking to people of different persuasions about the faith. So that should be a fun interview. I'm very much looking forward to it. I spent he's thankfully a local guy, and I spent 2 hours with him, and it flew by.
Absolutely. It's amazing to me just in starting the podcast. Mine is a little over a year old. And what I've just really enjoyed, and I'm sure you're finding this to be the case too, is you're connecting with people who you've never met before. But right. All these stories are coming together. And the reason we do these podcasts is hopefully to provide content and information to people that they're able to take away with them. And that was one of the things that I always experienced as a Catholic school principal was there's just no one spot, no one-stop shopping for resources on the things that were relevant to what I needed at that particular time. So that's kind of what I've tried to do with the podcast that I do, is just to bring different conversations to the table that I think people really want to have. And it sounds like you're doing the same thing, which is awesome.
Yeah, well, so the name of the podcast is the Lead Different podcast, John, and what I really like about getting to know you and the work that you do is you're putting a different twist on something that's very important. Now, we're in a new era in terms of schools, a new presidential administration that's talking a lot about school choice and possibly those Catholic schools that you help not necessarily needing to do as much fundraising, but heck, guess what? That's not here yet. And the reality has been, and I've been involved in Catholic school fundraising for over 30 years. And so I know what a struggle it is to operate without public funding. And everything that you buy has to come from the tuition that you raise or those angel fundraisers that you have that are very generous and give you money. But nobody is operating at a surplus, right? And so you've taken that and you've really taken it on.
And I've yet to ever find a Catholic school, who has said to me, we're good. We have too much money. We don't need any more. And so we're good on that one. We don't really need what you're doing. All of our Catholic schools need to have resources to make their schools better, to improve upon the sites that you have. Our schools, a lot of them are older, and things break down. Eventually, your air conditioning goes, or your heating unit goes, or your roof needs replaced, or things like that. But also, you want to make those enhancements to make sure that what you're offering to your incoming families and your current families is really state of the art. And so to me, one of the things I think it's a big misconception for Catholic schools is that our tuition covers what our expenses are.
Right.
And while that's the case in some schools, I did an episode recently with Donna Moss, and we talked about a cost-based, need-based tuition model, which is a very different model than a lot of people are used to. But in most of our schools, our tuition doesn't cover 100% of our expenses. And so therefore, there's only a few ways as Catholic schools that we can generate revenue, and that's enrollment, that's through parish support, or that's through advancement. And advancement efforts would be fundraising and annual funds and donors and angel supporters and things like that. And so a lot of schools just aren't taking advantage of those things. And so what I do is I help them to find ways that work specifically for their community. Because as you know, Dan, every Catholic school community is different. And what works for school A, it may not work to a T for school B. And so every Catholic school community is different. And so therefore you have to kind of find what that key is that's going to unlock the door in that particular school.
And there's so much to that. And I selfishly plan on learning here today because I am involved in fundraising for our school in Albuquerque. We met through one of our principals in Albuquerque at St. Mary's School.
Yep. Great school.
𝗵𝗵𝗵𝗵 𝗟𝗃 running a great school down
Awesome.
there. My oldest daughter graduated from there. So my wife went there, and her grandfather was in the first graduating class from St. Mary's back in 1914, I believe.
Wow.
So she has some history in the school, and so we'll definitely get into some of those questions. But John, would you mind if I introduce you to the audience before we get started? I want to make sure everybody knows who John Mihalyo is. So you're the founder and CEO of Elementary Advancement Solutions.
Yep.
You're a passionate advocate for Catholic education, dedicated to helping schools thrive through strategic leadership and fundraising. With over 25 years in education and 2 decades in leadership, you've increased enrollment, funding, and marketing success as a principal at 3 different Catholic schools. Now, what you're doing now is you're offering personalized coaching to help schools develop and exceed fundraising goals. You also lead mastermind groups for school leaders nationwide, providing a supportive space for collaboration and growth. Additionally, you've raised over $1.8 million in fundraising efforts and directed a $5.5 million high school renovation. John's hands-on, tailored approach ensures that school leaders achieve lasting success. How'd I do there, John?
Yeah, hey, I'm flattered by that, and the other piece too, I would say that I offer is really that advancement support, but also the enrollment support, because as we know, if we don't have enrollment in our schools, we are going to have a hard time doing fundraising and doing advancement dollars for sure. And so, one of the things that I work with a lot of schools with even right now is enrollment support to get those enrollment numbers up. And a lot of times it's amazing, those 3 pieces, that leadership piece, the enrollment piece, and the advancement piece, all 3 of those things tie in so closely together. And it's like you can't have one without the other. And so work with a lot of schools to support them in all 3 of those areas.
So John, you mentioned as we were talking earlier, and it was part of your introduction, the experience that you've gained. What takes you from you're a very successful principal at 3 different schools. You were probably doing these things that you're now teaching other leaders about. What took you out of that space into the consulting and helping others space? What was that decision? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so it's really something that I've been intrigued with for a number of years. And then you may have heard of this in New Mexico, that there was this little thing called COVID that hit and really slowed the world down. And at the time, I was a new principal at a school. So COVID was all the focus at that point. It was just staying open and keeping our schools going and keeping our kids healthy and keeping our faculty healthy while trying to run a normal school. And as you know, during that time, normal was the furthest thing from anybody's mind. And so once that started to really pass, I said, this idea is just really, really tugging at my heart. And I talked with my wife about it, and it was the right time. It was the right time to do it. It was just an opportunity to really, and I guess one of the things that I looked at was, in my current school, I can work with one school, but as I'm continuing to get calls coming in from schools in other states saying, "Hey, how are you all doing this?" Or even within their own diocese, "How are you doing this? How's this going? How do you do this?" And I had a call with a school that just from a mutual friend who said, "Hey, can you talk to the school?" I said, "Sure." And we talked for about 90 minutes. And at the end of the conversation, she said, "You should be doing this full time, because this is so valuable, what you've given me today." And that school called me back a few months later and said, "Hey, not only did we hit our annual fund goals, but we exceeded them by this much, and our participation increased this much. This was so helpful." And I said, "Well, ironically enough, you had mentioned about starting my own company, and that's what I've decided to do." And so it was exciting for me. It's been an exciting ride for the last 18 months as I've been doing this. And so I'm really just enjoying the opportunity to not only work with one school, but to work with multiple schools across the United States and even in other countries to support them to grow Catholic education across the world.
That's fabulous, John, and I really appreciate the transition. It sounds like you almost didn't have a choice. You kind of you were doing a great job. You were being a principal, but everybody wanted to know how you were doing it, and one of those opportunities led to you making that decision. But I imagine, as a longtime educator, there's a certain stability, and in education, probably, unless you decide to go into another type. If you go to high school, I don't know what kind of schools you were leading. Were they high schools or elementary schools?
So my first ever job was at a high school. The second job was as a K-8, and the third one was at a pre-K through 8. So I've kind of had experience in all different realms of the world right there.
So you had a full high school, which
yes,
and then a pre-K through 8, and then a K through 8. You said
K through 8, and then a pre-K through 8. Yep.
Excellent.
And the funny thing is, people always talk about, "Oh, I don't know about my school. It's older, it's falling apart, it's things like that." My very first day on the job was I literally got to the school a day before my contract started. And we had relocated, and I got there just to unpack some boxes and kind of get your office set up so that way I can hit the ground running on July 1st. And I was there for about 2 hours. I'll never forget this gentleman in a hard hat came down, and he said, "Are you in charge here?" And I'm the only one in the school. And I said, "Well, I will be tomorrow. Why? What, can I help you with something?" And he said, "I just want to let you know that we're not going back up there." And I said, "I don't even know where you are."
Where is up there?
No idea who you are. Yeah, where is up there?
Are you an angel?
Yes, exactly. Maybe. And so we walked up to the second floor, and where the roof and the building met, there was a gap about this much.
Oh, wow.
And he said, we could that wall could collapse at any time. And so we're not comfortable with this. And so here I am, not even officially having started the job.
Right.
And now we have a school that's not only falling apart, but literally falling apart. So the enrollment had been struggling. The advancement was really a brand new concept. And so, and now I have a school that's falling apart. And so when you enter the world of education and educational leadership, especially in a Catholic school, it is truly, as Forrest Gump says, it's a box of chocolates that you never know what you're going to get. And so, it's those type of experiences, both at the high school level and at the elementary school level, that really give me a lot of tools in the toolbox that I can give to other schools who come to the table and go, "Oh man, I don't know if you've ever heard of a school like that." "Yeah, have we heard of it?" "Yes, we're working with 2 others who are just dealing with something very similar to this." And so I think that's one of the nice things with the mastermind groups is, even on a recent one for principals, one of the principals in the groups, I said, what did you learn from today?" And he said, "I'm just happy that I'm not the only one dealing with these things." And 3 others were like, "Yes, me too. Yes. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that." So I think that's the piece right there within Catholic education that we really need is to bring our leaders together more often.
There's a couple of things I want to follow up on. You talk about in your intro, we talked about you've successfully increased enrollment, funding, and marketing success at all three schools that you worked at. This sounds like a really challenging one. How do you go from day before you take over, the roof's literally caving in, or or there's a wall about to collapse, to increasing enrollment, fundraising, and marketing success, and making a big positive impact on that school? What were some of the things that you learned in overcoming that challenge that you've been able to share?
So I think that when you enter a new school, oftentimes, and when you enter as a leader, even if you've been at your school for a number of years, the first question people want to know is, what's unique about this school? Why should I come to this school? And especially if you're a Catholic school where there's a tuition model involved, why should I spend X amount of dollars for this? What am I going to get for this? And I think the biggest thing that I see schools struggling with is telling their story and telling the story of what's unique about their school and what makes their school special. And here's the thing, Dan, that I say, and if you're a Catholic school leader out there that's listening to this, if I ask you today, what's special about your school? And the only two answers you give me are, well, we're built around the faith. You should be. You're a Catholic school. That's a given to me. Okay.
Right.
That's like telling me, like, if that's not part of who you are, you're a private school. So just to say that we're the faith, yes, that's extremely important. That's the reason we exist. But we got to go more than just that.
Right.
And then if you tell me, well, we're one big family, that's a given as well. People want more than that. And maybe that answer 25 years ago would carry the day. It's not good enough today. So we have to ask ourselves, what's making us unique about our school? What is it that we're known for? And if the other piece too that I find with so many schools is they are resting on who they were 10 years ago versus who they are today. Yeah. And I find it in their marketing material. I find it on their websites. I find it on their, who we are even when you're giving tours. If who you're advertising that you are is not who you are today, then you're putting yourself behind, because then you're selling people something where one of the articles I wrote was, are you underselling and over delivering, or are you overselling and under delivering? Right. And if you're overselling and under delivering, it's not going to take long before people don't trust you. And if people don't trust you, that creates a big void in your school.
What kind of story, John, do you tell on day one, on July 1st of what year was that when you
boy, that would be 2008. Man, it seems like it was just yesterday right there.
Yeah, you don't look at a year over 30, so I don't know how you've done that.
Well, I'm 31, so I won't lie to you. No, I wish I was 31. But I think the big thing too is you as a leader need to do a lot of listening. And one of the things that I tended to do with my core leadership group is to say, what's our core values here? What are we all about? And there's a big difference, as you know, between, well, these are our core values, and then what we really have as our core values. And so you really need to do a lot of listening, even leading up to assuming the job on the first day. Right. What are you looking into? What are people saying about the school? Because that's one of the things that I offer right now as a service is I do an audit for Catholic schools, and it's all about what is it that you're telling me you're all about. And then when I go in as a new parent who's looking at your school for the first time, what does that tell me that you're all about? And when I do those audits, the reviews and the website and things like that, do those two things match? And if the answer is no, where's the gap at right there? And so that's one of the things I offer to schools is that huge audit right there. But I think for when you're walking into the school, you need to do a lot of listening. I would make it a point to say to faculty, listen, I'm setting aside 3 weeks, and here's slots that you can come and sign up for a time with me for a half hour. If you just want to come and get to know me and ask questions about me, and but I would always ask them, tell me what you love about the school, tell me what you think where we could have opportunities for growth. And the other thing I would always ask them is, tell me what you're passionate about. Because that right there was always an opportunity when you would hear somebody's passionate about this. Well, maybe this opportunity comes at your school. Right. And when that opportunity comes, you go, ooh, this person was really all about it. One of my early recruitment and marketing directors came from those conversations and saw that she was very passionate about really that aspect of marketing. And so when we started that office, she was the first person we called and talked to, and she did a phenomenal job. And so you just have to identify those skills that you want. You have your vision for what you want that school to look like. Obviously, you wouldn't have taken the job if you didn't.
Right.
But I think you really have to know, where are we starting at to know how we're going to get there. And I think the other thing that I learned through all this process, Dan, is you can't let your eyes be bigger than your stomach.
Mm-hmm.
We all walk in, and we all, after we've talked to our employees, after we've talked to our parents, after we've put our eyes on a school, we know probably after just a little bit of time what needs to be done. But one of the things I always tell schools is work on 3 things. Because if you do 10 things, you say, we're going to take these 10 things on this year, and 8 of them you do to a T. They're perfect. They couldn't have been any better. And the other 2 come up short. What's the only 2 things anybody's going to talk about?
The 2 you came up short on.
2 that came up short. So to me, I always encourage schools, take on 3 things. And if one of those takes a lot less time than you thought it would to fully integrate it into the culture that you're creating, great. Then you can check that off and move to the next thing. But do 3 things a year. And if you take those 3 things, I guarantee you will start to see your school improve. Because what's always fun for me is when a school gets to that other side where it's like, wow, remember a couple years ago when our enrollment was only this and now it's this? Wow, remember that first year we did an annual fund, it was only this much fun, and now we have this much that came in. Remember our gala or auction or golf tournament when we started with this amount of money a couple of years ago, and now it's at this. That's the point that you look back on. But what's crazy is when you do that process, the days seem so long, but the years seem to fly by so fast. And you look back on it really with a sense of pride and accomplishment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I hear that. I hear the days being long and the years fly by, right? Next thing you know, you're in December and you're looking at, whoa, what happened? Where did 2024 go? I'm saying that about March. I mean, we're almost done with the first quarter, John. You mentioned earlier, let's talk about this. So we didn't get to it. It's July 1st, 2008, you said, and you're starting at this school. You got a hole in the roof. You got workers don't want to work on it. You went from that to increasing enrollment, increasing your fundraising, increasing your marketing, and leaving that school a better place than you found it. Then you went to another school, and you did the same thing. And then you went to another school, and you did the same thing. And the reason I bring that up, John, is because we're gonna share a little bit about you that we've discovered through the 𝗬𝗚. So John's why, and the coaches that are listening know his why has got to be better way. What we know about people with your why,
it's a shocker, isn't it?
A better way is you're always looking to make things better. Wherever you go, you're going to come in and say, okay, how can we be better? How can we make it better? But the other thing that we know is once you make it better, then it's boring. You've got to go somewhere else where you can make something better. So once it's flowing and it's working really good, you got to go find another school that's struggling and let's make that school better. So I don't know, and this probably be a great question for your wife, but she probably was like, hey, you just got this thing going really well. Why are you going to another school with the roof collapsing? Have you noticed that pattern in your life of constantly wanting to improve and things getting boring when there's nothing to improve?
Yeah, it's, for me, I always like a challenge. And if things are, I know that sounds very spoiled, but things are too good, it's like, wow, there's nothing you can always improve, you can always get better. But to me, I always liked that opportunity to work with a clean slate, where it's okay, we are here and we know that we have a long way to go. To me, that's exciting. There's something exciting about that. And to start I remember Jimmy Johnson, I heard him give a quote once when he first took over the Cowboys. And he said, I either want to be on the top as the champion or I want to be at the absolute bottom starting all over again. I never want to be 8-8 as a coach. Yeah. And to me, I always thought about that quote because to me, I don't ever want to be an 8-and-8 principal. I either want our schools to be here and leading the pack, or starting here and let's build our way there. I think one of the questions you asked before, and I don't know if I answered it very well, but you asked about, how do you jump through enrollment? I mean, that's one big piece of school, because if you don't have students in the school, you don't have school.
Right.
Okay? You could have the best
Right.
fundraising in the world, but if you don't have students in the school, you don't have a school. And so I think one of the things that we have lost in our society is the personalization of things. And so many times our schools are just, will show up and you're lucky to have us, and we're going to deliver this and take it or leave it, and you can leave if you don't like it, kind of thing. Versus when a person is coming to your school for that first time, they're excited. They've maybe heard about it from other people. There's maybe a little bit of nervousness. Maybe there's some anxiety. Maybe there's some fear, whatever the case may be. Maybe this is the first time their first child is going to school. And so this is a unique experience for that family.
Right.
So why wouldn't you make it a unique experience for that family? And so for me, one of the things that our schools would always do is we stopped doing open houses. Open houses are great, but here was my problem with an open house. When do you have an open house? Well, you either have it in the evening or you have it on a weekend. And if you have an open house just for the purpose of recruiting new families, now I know there's a lot of big schools out there who can get away with this because you're enrolling, 800 kids a year or whatever the case might be. And so an open house works well for you. No problem at all. I'm talking to St. Generic Catholic school who maybe, doesn't have more than a couple hundred students at your school. Why, if you're going to have an open house that's going to be an event for all your parents, why would you not spend time with each of those parents individually for a tour? Why would you not sit down with each of those parents and hear what's important to them? What questions do they have? Learn about what their son or daughter's interest is. Learn about what your school has to offer, but also why they're coming to you. How did they hear about you? And so, even with our schools, there was a specific tour that we would give to families. And so, for example, when a person would call and inquire, my admissions director would take that call and schedule that call, and boom, within a few minutes would either give a video email back or a personalized email back saying, hey, it was so great to talk with you today. I'm looking forward to you visiting the school on, April 1st at 10 o'clock. You mentioned that your son is into basketball. Here's some information below about our basketball camp coming up over the summer. I can't wait to see you. But now there's a face with a name that you just talked to. Right. And what we found is when those video emails would go out, you would be shocked at the open rates on those, because they would be several times over, because you want to see who it is you're meeting with. And then, when that family comes for the tour, your tour director is your admissions director is waiting for them at the door to welcome them into the school. What do they see when they walk into your school? Do they know within about 5 seconds that your school is a Catholic school, or do they not? Mm-hmm. And what's the feeling that they get? And you want them, as they're going through that tour, to be building excitement. Well, right. I go back to the open houses. When do you have open houses? Usually in the evening. And if you have open houses in the evening, it's probably dark outside. Mm-hmm. Your school's empty. It's dark. Your teachers are there after hours.
They're not happy.
Okay. And they're even more frustrated if you have an open house where you've asked them to give their time for a couple of hours, which always grateful for that. But think if nobody visits their classroom.
Right.
That's discouraging to them. Okay. And so to me, if you can personalize that experience, and who's the stars of our show, Dan? Our students.
Right.
Why would you not bring a prospective family in to see what your kindergartners are doing, what your third graders are doing, live and in person, so that they can envision their child being in that classroom? That excitement builds. And then what we would always have with our tours were, it would always end with a knock at my door. Let's see if he's available. Oh, hey, this is our principal, and take the time to meet them. And the best thing about it was 9 times out of 10, I would say, well, are there any questions I can answer for you? They would say, oh, no, this person did such a great job with the tour. But that was their job, and there was a lot of intentionality behind that. We wanted to make sure that people saw what our school was all about, to give them what our core values were and what we offer. And going back to that question, what makes us unique from everybody else? And so, yes, there's a big investment of time on that, but that personalizing of that experience was so valuable and so important.
Yeah, I think we have to go back as I hear you say that, and I love that. And so I'm gonna finish up your introduction in terms of your 𝗬𝗚. John's why is better way. So we know that, we see that in everything you do. We see you moving around, and it eventually landing in a place. You're in a place now where you can constantly help schools be better. You're constantly taking all that information, all that you learned from being a principal for all those years, being an administrator, and then sharing it with others so they can succeed. So that definitely, one of the things we know about Better Way people is when they find a better way to do something, they want to share it. And that's exactly what you're doing. Your hows makes sense. So you're a problem solver. So how you find better ways is by solving complex and challenging problems. You look for ways to fix what's broken. When people are stuck, you help them get unstuck. And then your what is challenge. And so I know the people that are listening to know the 9 whys are going to say, well, yeah, no wonder Dan gets along, because we share make sense and challenge. But you're not afraid to do things differently. You're not afraid to deliver a solution that's outside the box and different than what everybody else is doing. So what you get working with John is somebody who's going to look for a better way for you to do increase enrollment, increase fundraising, and improve your marketing. You're going to do that by solving the problems that you find. And you mentioned it, you do an audit with every school that you visit. So you're going to make sense of it, figure out the problems, find out what the solutions are, find better ways to do things. And you will ultimately deliver solutions that are outside the box and different, that are going to make the schools that hire you or the people that work with you stand out from their competition. And so you're not going to be afraid to do things a little different. You mentioned personalization. You mentioned no open houses. You mentioned video emails. I can't tell you how powerful that sounds. Imagine being a parent that tours a school and getting a video email from the principal that says, hey, hope you enjoyed the tour. Thank you for being here. Or as you said, you would have your person that gives a tour send a video email. So that when they came to the school, they knew the face they were going to see, right?
And here's the cherry on the sundae with this, because to me, I think when you say a personalization of things, we would take that video email service that we had, and at the beginning of the year, we would tell our faculty, hey, on this day, we're going to come around and record a quick intro of you to invite parents to our back to school day or our meet the teacher day or whatever the case may be. So let's just hypothetically say that meet the teacher day was on Friday morning. We would say on Tuesday afternoon, we're going to come around to your classrooms to record an intro video for you. Right. And it doesn't need to be anything outrageous. Okay. We don't need it to be 10 minutes. It is a quick, hi, I'm Mr. Mihalyo. I teach 4th grade. I'm so excited that you're in my class this year. This is our classroom. This is maybe my teaching assistant. We're going to do so many great things this year. Maybe highlight something, 30 to 45 seconds. Okay. That's all you need.
Right.
And I can't wait to see you at the Meet the Teacher on Friday. Okay. Now you go through and you record those videos for every one of your teachers. And now maybe your middle school or your specialists or things like that. Maybe you get them all in a group together, but then you send that email out to teachers, say on Wednesday or Thursday, or I'm sorry, to parents on Wednesday or Thursday. One, it's a reminder that we have this Meet the Teacher. So there's your community building. Right. Okay. 2, you're giving a personalized introduction. Now we're not going to do one for every single kid in terms of, hi Mary, hi Joe, hi,
Sure.
It was one for each grade level or one for each classroom, but you send that out at the beginning of the year. We could track our open rates and our play rates on those videos.
Right.
And certain videos were like 300, 400%.
Yeah.
And we said, what's going on here? Why are they so high? Because the parents open it. And then, of course, they're going to show it to their kids who are going to watch the video 5 times. And then what are you going to do with it? You're going to send it to grandma and grandpa. Okay. Yeah. Or maybe your friend who you're trying to say, hey, this is a great school. Did your school do this? No, my school didn't do that. They just said, we'll see you on the first day. Okay.
Right.
It's a personalized experience. So we were finding these open rates were going up, 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 up.
I was wondering how you were getting to 400%.
Yeah,
so there were multiple openings.
Multiple openings.
100% is they open it, right?
Exactly.
40% is 40% of the people opening.
Well,
but 400% is they're opening it multiple times.
Yeah, what percentage of the videos were being played? Okay,
right.
was where we were getting our high percentages. And so what was interesting about this, here's where everything ties together within your school. In a great school, everything looks like it happens on accident, but it's all intentional. Okay, and that's the big thing. When we would have Grandparents' Day, we would have several hundred grandparents that would come for Grandparents' Day. And guess what? One of the first things they would tell me is, we saw your teacher video at the beginning of the year. That was just the greatest thing in the world. So they were sending them to grandparents who got them excited about what we were doing, so that when they could come to the school to see it for themselves, it was a great thing. Okay. Yes. And I'll never forget this. We had Grandparents' Day the one year. We actually had to use Google Earth or Google Maps because we had two grandparents that had traveled such great distances that it was from outside the United States. One traveled from like India, the other one from the Philippines or wherever. And we literally had to like do the map of how far. And I said, so you just didn't, no, we came specifically for this. And so you think about that, to travel that far and to build it around that whole day, just to be part of that. That's something special right there.
That's a tremendous impact and a great visualization of what personalization can do. And man, I'm taking lots of notes here, John, because you're giving me some great ideas. Let me ask you about your leadership journey, because you've been at this now 18 months.
Yeah.
There's the comfort of you're the big dog at the school. You've been the big dog 3 different times and you've done really well. And this COVID thing happens and you decide to jump into something completely different. What was your biggest fear coming into the entrepreneurial space and starting EAS?
The biggest thing, I think, with any change, and I always would tell people that everybody will say to me, everybody hates change. And my argument to them is I don't think anybody hates change. They hate transition. And there's the fear of transition of, is this going to be something that's going to work or not work? You know what I mean? You take a new job, you buy a new house, you move, or whatever the case might be. The transition is the really hard part. And once you're there, it's a great thing. And so to me, one of the biggest things that I wanted to make sure of is I had led this 3 different times very successfully each time. And we had great people, that I attribute a lot of that success to the great people that we have. But the big thing for me was, now can we take what I did here and apply it when I'm not running the school? And so that's been a fun thing for me, is to see it working with schools that were really struggling, schools that were, wow, if we don't figure something out here soon, we're losing enrollment so drastically that we may have to make some big decisions here. That's the kind of schools that I get excited about working with, because they're eager to get better. And it's not like it's a matter of, well, we know what we're doing is working. You're like, no, I don't think it is, because if it was working, you wouldn't be in the situation that you are. But also there are schools that I'm working with who are doing things very well, but as Jim Collins says, we want to go from good to great. And so, the schools I work with are not just ones that are struggling. I work with schools of a variety of where they're at in the world, okay, in terms of trying to improve themselves. And so that's been the fun thing for me, is to work with schools. One school that I'm working with, they never had an annual fund, and boom, their annual fund in the last 3 months has raised over $40,000, and they have less than 150 kids in their school. Okay. It's fun when you meet with somebody who's doing, a lot of the schools I work with have the person doing both advancement and enrollment together. And when you're meeting with a school and you say, well, our goal was to be at 120 students, but wow, we're at 145 students. That's a big thing right there, because you start to think about that. Those 25 students, that's a big number when it comes in terms of tuition, when it comes in terms of stability and things like that. Recently I met with a enrollment advancement director, and okay, let's go through your enrollment by grade level. Well, where are you what's your enrollment today? Well, it's this. Okay, well, do you realize that's where you're at right now with 4 months, 5 months left to go before next year starts, you're already at your number that you were at last year at the end of enrollment season. You're already there. So anything you add at this point is just going to be, a cherry on top of the sundae. That's exciting for these schools. And when you're talking with schools that's capacity might be, you think about it. If your capacity is 200 students and your current number of students that you have is 120, you're not talking about adding 200 students to your school. You're talking about trying to find a way to go up 50 students. And, one of the things that we look at a lot is how do we get kids in early so that they're going to stay there for a number of years and we can count on them. And so one of the things I always like to see is when the schools I'm working with, when their smallest classes are the ones that are graduating. Because if you have a class of, say, 10 students, and you replace them in kindergarten with a class of 25 students, that's a net gain of 15 right there. Okay. And so now do that repeatedly over a couple of years. It's a good problem to have when you say to a parent, we have a wait list, because that's great marketing. Because I guarantee if you have a wait list that year, people will start applying earlier and earlier. And I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, Dan, but a true story we had was I knew we had our school going well when my enrollment director came into me and she said, "You're not going to believe the phone call I just got." And I said, "What do you got?" And she said, "They wanted to enroll their child." I said, "Great. What grade?" And she started laughing. She said, "I asked them that." I said, "Okay, what grade are they in?" I'm not following you. She said, "They told me that the kid is being born in 3 months, but they didn't want to get waitlisted. And so they wanted to enroll them today." And we got to talk about that when we said, well, let's just get through that first part first, and then we can chat about that. But there it is. It's like when a family is baptized in your parish, are you doing anything to make them aware of your school? Send them a little, I don't know, a bib or a little T-shirt,
a little
something.
Right.
But that requires that collaboration within the parish and the school community. So it's those kind of things. When you get to that point where people are calling you before the child was even born yet, you know that your marketing and your word of mouth marketing must be doing something really well.
I love that. That is really good. So your big fear, so I think the answer to the question was your big fear was not the change, it was the transition.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you're used to a steady...
How did you, because you can't always, and maybe you have, maybe you're one of those special people, but how did you gain that mindset of not being afraid of change, being afraid of changing it to afraid of the transition, and then making yourself amenable to it? Sounds like you had an easy transition. How did you overcome those fears for your family and for your spouse? Those are the people, how do you go from that stability of the principal to being an entrepreneur? And you've been at it 18 months.
Yep.
So you've obviously succeeded so far. How did you make that transition?
So one of the things that I believe firmly, mm-hmm. and my wife and I believe very firmly, is I'm not in charge. Okay. So God has a plan for me. And, when you start to have those doubts and you go, oh, maybe this wasn't the best thing for me. One of the things on my bookshelf, I have a mass journal that I have every week when I go to mass. And the first thing I write in that mass journal is, I trust in you. I trust in your divine plan for me and surrender myself to you completely. And God would not get me to this point only to go, oh yeah, by the way, just kidding. You're on your own now. And so a lot of this is trust in his plan, not my plan. Because sometimes when we have what we want or what we think is the plan for us, it turns out to be very, very different than what God's plan is. And I have always found, no matter the circumstances, his plan has always been better than mine. And so for me, what gives you that? You have to trust, and you have to know that there's a plan for you, and just to surrender yourself so that plan can take play. And too many times we fight against it. And I once had somebody say to me, they said the Dominican sisters will tell you that first God whispers, then he talks, and then he screams. And you don't want him to get to the point where he screams. So you just need to listen and trust and surrender and not fight against.
That's a great way to build confidence, and it sounds like things have worked out. Thank you for sharing that, John.
Yeah.
What's been you're welcome to say, "Hey, Dan, I don't want to share that," but I think you will because you're an honest guy and you're an upfront, and you've been very open today. But tell me about a time during this journey when you felt like quitting. What's something that made you say, "Man, am I doing the right thing?" And then you ask the Lord, right? You say, "Hey, is this what you want me to do?" And tell us about that time and how'd you deal with it?
I know you're probably not going to believe this, but I haven't had that because I know it's what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not doing my work. I'm doing his. And what am I doing? But I'm helping grow Catholic education around the world. And it's always exciting for me when you talk to somebody who says, "Hey, I listened to your podcast. Hey, I found your thing on LinkedIn. Hey, I talked to somebody who was working with you and they said you might be able to help me with this," or whatever the case might be. But there hasn't been 1 second. I wake up in the morning and I'm excited to get to talk to the schools that I'm working with. And hey, there's some times where they're dealing with something that's heavy for them, and we've got to, walk through. And you're okay. Let's talk through this together. Let's find a solution for it. But it's not what I do is not just say do this, do this, do this, do this, because what's happening at your school might be different than what's happening at this school, and so you need to do a lot of listening. And so what do I get to do? But I'm getting to help schools solve problems, across the United States, into better Catholic education. And so I don't know, maybe that's unbelievable to people, but there hasn't been one moment where I've looked at my wife and gone, "I think this was a bad move." Like this just hasn't happened. And so to answer your question, I can't answer it because it hasn't happened to me.
No, I love that. I think I think what you're speaking to is you're mission driven, right? You feel like you're doing the work, as you said, you're doing God's work. Why Catholic education? Why is it so important for you to make a difference in this space?
So what's funny about this is growing up, I did not attend Catholic school. I didn't go to Catholic grade school, didn't go to Catholic high school. I went to a public school my whole life. My dad was a steel mill worker. My mom was the secretary at the church. Not a whole lot of. I mean, I look back at our house when we grew up, and it's not a huge house by any means. We probably didn't have everything that we needed, but we never knew that, okay, as kids. And so, but I remember very vividly with my mom working at the church, and my dad was Eucharistic minister, and the faith was something that was really important to us and our family. And even in the summers, we would get to go to work. My sister and I would get to go to work with my mom, and the pastor was nice enough to let her bring the kids to the rectory, and we could go outside and play and things like that. But we were always around the church. And then when I got of age, where I could work in the summers, where did I work? Well, I worked cleaning and painting and waxing and stripping and things like that. The floors in the high school and the church and the grade school and things like that. That was my summer job. And so I've always been around it, and meeting my wife, and that was something that really connected us, was our faith. And so, that's been the big thing. And even on our first date, when she asked me what would be your dream job, I said I would love to be a principal of a Catholic school. That would. And at the time I was working in the public schools, and I said there's just something about that. And so here I am now, how many years later, and I'm getting to work with a lot of Catholic schools, which is even more exciting for me.
So John, if I knew you, and let's say, I'm one of your colleagues from your public school days. How many years ago was that?
Wow. So that would have been like 99 to 08. So what? Couple.
Yeah, 99 to 08. So we were teaching together at a public school.
Yeah.
And we run into each other. It's 2025, March of 2025. What am I going to say is different about John? What am I going to notice as the biggest change in John from that time to today?
Wow. Well, I think besides the more gray hair that I have and probably the wrinkles under my eyes, I think probably the biggest thing is they would see somebody who's very happy with his life. Back in the public school days, I hadn't met my wife, didn't have my kids, and my faith journey was really in its infant stages. And in all honesty, it probably still is. Because my father-in-law is one of the most faithful people I know, and he said I probably know about 2% about our faith that I need to, and just because there's so much to know and to learn and to grow in, and so for me, I think you would see somebody who's happy because he's doing what he's passionate about. And I think that would be something that would be very, very obvious to anybody I talk to.
That's a great answer. John, leadership is hard. I know this. I've led teams in sports. I've led teams in high school and military, and then in the corporate world. We don't realize how hard it is. What's the hardest thing about leadership that you would, let's say, warn somebody who's a great administrator that is moving into a principal role? What advice would you have for them with all your experience leading schools, leading teams, and now leading leaders? What's one thing that a leader stepping into a leadership role should be aware of?
So the first thing I would say is if you're stepping in, it's a privilege to be a leader. So don't ever take that for granted. Don't ever get full of yourself and think that you're the show. You've been given the privilege to lead, and it's something that you need to kind of protect and defend that privilege, because it's not one you should take for granted. I think the biggest thing that I found in a lot of what I do with my company is to support the things maybe that I didn't have as a principal. The biggest thing I would say is it's a lonely job. And your teachers can chum around, and you're in a position where you're kind of on your own on this one. That's why I started the mastermind groups that I do, because sometimes those people that are in a leadership role, whether they're a principal or an advancement director or a recruitment director, or maybe you're just somebody who's aspiring to be a principal one day, maybe you're an assistant principal or a dean right now, it gets lonely because you can't exactly, as a teacher, you can go into the other teacher's classroom and go, hey, I'm struggling with this. How should I handle this? Or this kid's doing this. How should I do this? Or I'm thinking about teaching this lesson. How would you teach it? And you can get a perspective from somebody else. When you're in a leadership role, you can't walk into the principal's door next door to you because you're the only one there to say, hey, how would you do this? Or what do you think about this one? Now, we all have our colleagues that we can call and bounce ideas off of, but sometimes I find in a diocese, you don't want to kind of put all your business out there because you don't want to be judged. You don't want to be people to think, oh man, what's going on at that school? And so it's a great opportunity when people can come together, like I said, through mastermind groups or working with me, that they can just go, listen, this is something that's really, I am struggling with right now. This. Okay, let's walk through that. The interesting thing is, Dan, and you probably know this from working with leaders, I would say 50% of the time, this is what they came in with to say, I am struggling with this. But really, it's this. Mm-hmm. This is a symptom. Right. This is the root cause of the problem. Okay. And so what we can kind of do is to walk through those things is kind of say, okay, well, what was it? Well, this is what happened. Da, 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 da. Okay, well, why did that? Okay. And then you get to this, and then we're finding solutions together, but then they're going to get something from me later on and say, hey, how did that go? Or, one person I'm working with, I said, this is what we need to do. She's like, I know I need to do that. And I said, okay, I'm calling you at 2:00 today to see if that was done. Okay. Or I'm going to send you an email at 2:00 to say, how did that go? And so that I'm going to be calling you, or that I'm going to be emailing you. So this needs to be a priority today. Okay, yeah. boom, shoot an email, and how did it go? Yes, I got it done. This was what it was. Here's the finished product of it. Great.
Yes.
But sometimes just having that accountability and knowing that you're going to have somebody there to walk with you and to help you with what it is that you're trying to do. And sometimes in some instances, as you know, you're lost because you feel like you're just spinning your wheels. But when you hand it over to somebody else to go, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. You know, this is a leadership consultant. You hand it over to somebody else and go, hey, they go, well, have you thought about doing this? And you go, I hadn't thought of that. But I think sometimes one of the biggest things, so you asked me what advice I would give. It's a lonely job. Don't feel like you have to go at it alone.
Yeah.
Because guess what? If you feel it's bad today, something is not going well in your school.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, if you don't get any help on it in the next month, it'll look even worse. Okay. Yeah. And what's the thing that people say, Dan? Well, I don't have time. I don't have the money to do that. But if you work with somebody who does this and who has this kind of expertise, what are we going to give you back? You're going to get more time. You're probably going to have more money in your wallets because you're going to have a better understanding and a grasp of what's going on in your school. And, that's the big thing right there. So my biggest thing is don't go at it alone, because it's a lonely job when you first get there. It is all those friends that you had as the teachers. Now you're maybe in charge of them. Maybe you're responsible for them. And I guarantee you, the first time you don't make the decision that they think you should make, you're going to have less friends. The first time you zig when people think you should zag, you're going to have less friends. And here's the other thing I would say to people. If 100% of the people, and you asked before about challenges, 100% of the people agree with 100% of the decisions you're making 100% of the time, you're not making any decisions worth anything. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because you as a leader are responsible for making the tough decisions. And if everybody's always agreeing with what you're doing every single time, you're probably not making very challenging decisions. I knew, Dan, the one time I learned this lesson. We said the one year we exceeded our advancement goals, we exceeded our enrollment goals. We had everything was great. And I announced to our parents, I said, we're not going to raise tuition this year. We're going to keep it at 0%. And somebody called and complained about that.
Right.
Okay? And you want to know the thing was? They were right. Because their argument was you need to do a cost of living increase. Okay? And it was an interesting perspective of when I looked back on it, I said, we should have went up 1%. Okay? But you learn it. You learned. Okay? But there's always a perspective. Somebody will always say to you, you should have done differently. And you listen to them because maybe you're going to see a different perspective on it. And that doesn't mean you can waver on your decisions. When you make a decision, you got to go with it. But it's a lonely job. Don't be afraid to get some help on that.
Yeah, and I heard that. I think the first thing you said is leadership is a privilege, and you can't forget that. It's a responsibility. It's a big responsibility. Sometimes it gets thrown on us, whether we want it or not, right? And other times we become leaders. The principal isn't always the leader, right? How many times have you walked into the school and you know who the leader is? It's not the principal, right? It's not always the principal. So leadership is hard. Leadership is lonely. I definitely heard that. And I love the fact that you support leaders by being, I think what I'm hearing is you come alongside them and you kind of lock arms and let's walk together and let's share perspectives. Let's hold each other accountable. And that's such a great gift that you bring. John, great answer. I really have enjoyed our time together. If there's a principal out there, if there's a school out there, a school, parish school or an archdiocese that's looking to work with John, what's the best way to get a hold of you? How do people go find you?
Yeah. So my company is Elementary Advancement Solutions. If you go on the web at elementaryadvancement.com is my website. I will just tell you this one, there's a lot of great resources on there. And I say that humbly. There's a lot of resources on there, articles, podcasts, and it really gives an overview of what I do as a business to help Catholic schools. On there's a time that you can click and schedule an appointment with me, no cost, just to let's talk about your school. And sometimes that's all people need. And sometimes people go, hey, you know what? I'm interested in doing some collaboration. Is there a mastermind opening for me right now? And that's what they want. Sometimes all they want is an audit of their school, and I do those for schools. Let's do an audit, and I present you. I literally go through I think 104-point checklist, and we'll give you a full report on that. And so, but the big thing is I want to make sure that cost is never a reason that people can't work with me. And so, give me a call. Like I said, visit elementaryadvancement.com. You can see everything that I'm doing, or you can just email me at John, John, at elementaryadvancement.com. I'm happy to talk to you. I want to hear what's going on at your Catholic school. I want to hear how I can help you and help you find what's going to make Catholic education grow and what's going to make it thrive. Because I think that's what we see a lot of times is schools are just trying to survive. And I want to help make sure that those Catholic schools are thriving. And the schools that I'm working with are seeing so much success. I'm so proud of them. It's just so awesome to see when we start off with doom and gloom, and now we're in the part where there's flowers blooming. And so I always remind people. A friend of mine, Jason Curtis, used to always say, "Without the rain, the flowers don't grow." And so we want to make sure that we're going to use this time when it's raining to plant some good, nice flowers in front of our houses so it looks really nice. And so elementaryadvancement.com is my website address. There's so much on there, and would love to talk to somebody if they're looking to grow Catholic education at their school, or maybe they're just running into a roadblock. Or quite frankly, if there's somebody that wants to make their school take it from good to great, would love to talk with you as well. As you and I both know some schools that I'm working with, they're great schools. Yes. And they're just looking to improve themselves. And so, I'd love to hear from you.
It's not about surviving, it's about thriving. I love that. That's a great answer. And you're right. I think a lot of schools will say, well, we're doing really great. We don't need any help. It's actually when you're doing great is the time to put in the time to develop and improve, because that way when the hard times come, you're ready, right? So there's never a bad time to bring in help, or to bring in advancement, or to improve advancement, enrollment, and marketing. I think it's always a good time, and to have an expert like you available is such a blessing to your clients. I know that Becky speaks so highly of you at St. Mary's School here in Albuquerque, and we've got to get you out to Albuquerque, John.
I can't wait.
That's got to be on the agenda.
Well, and I always say the balloon festival is on my bucket list, and so who knows? Maybe we'll do like a whole big thing there with it. So, but no, I agree with you so much that it is the time to improve is when things are good. Because how many times do you see that, Dan, when they get to that point because they've let it get to this, you say, well, now we have to cut art. Right. Well, now the kids that were into art now don't have that. Well, now we have to cut band. We have to cut PE. You start cutting things, and then it's like you're losing people as a result of that. So the time to get better is when things are good. Yeah. And when the time to get even better than that is when things are great. And so that's the time right there. You've got the opportunity right there. So don't run away from it. Don't rest on things, because I would bet you most Catholic schools out there, you think about this one. If our enrollment is steady, 50 a year, 50 a year, 50 a year, like every new grade coming in, 50 kids. We have 2 classes, 25 kids, 50. 1 year you open the year at 19. That's a net loss of 31 students. Yeah. What would that do to your school to now have that grade of 19 follow you that's big. Okay. Right. And then it's even worse if you have 2 straight years of 19. Now you have a big problem. Right. So don't let it get to that point where you can wander into trouble, but you can't wander out of it. You got to be intentional with it.
I love that. I'm going to save that, and that might be a banner that we use, Sunil. The time to get better is when things are going good, and the time to get better, maybe it's when things are going great. It's never a bad time to get better. Spoken like a true better way guy, John. It's always time to get better. John, this has been a great interview. What do you say we end the show on that note?
Absolutely. That sounds great. Why not?
There you go. John, thank you so much for being on. Listeners, please don't forget, listeners and viewers, we are on YouTube. We're on LinkedIn Live. We are going to be on Facebook. Please hit the like button, subscribe. Tell your friends about it. If you learned something today listening to John, if you're a Catholic school principal or you're a Catholic school leader, if you're on the advancement team or you're on the enrollment team and you'd like to run some ideas, I have seen the stuff that John has put together at elementaryadvancement.com. He's got some great resources there. He is very generous with his time, and I know that he's open to conversations. That's how we met, and we've had some great conversations already. We're going to have some great conversations going forward, John. So thank you so much for being on the Lead Different podcast, and I will see you all next week on the next episode of the Lead Different podcast. Have a great weekend.
This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different because great leaders change the world.